Right, Greg, it's been another fascinating week. I think we're in day 110 of the Iran war. Do you think it's actually over now? Brief synopsis, do you think it's over?
Honestly, yes. However, it's not the end of the story. I think Trump doesn't want this to kick off again, but the problem's not been solved, has it?
No, and we could get into all of that, but we don't have time. I think the fact is it does feels as if the dust is just starting to settle on the whole thing. The bit that I want to get into today is that um, Iran, we probably consider them a sort of third world nation when it came to military capability. I mean, frankly, they were no match at all for the Americans. And yet their ballistic missiles have got through, and they've got through despite America having state of the art Patriot, Aegis, and THAAD missiles. And yet there's still evidence that probably because of Russian targeting stuff, that these missiles have still got through. And I wonder whether there is a lesson from that as to for the rest of the world, North Korea, China, everybody, and what we in the UK should do about it. But I guess my first question is around that missile capability. I think we're very vulnerable in the UK, but I was talking to a politician literally earlier this week, and he just went, I think this whole threat's been overblown by Russia. And you're going, hang on a minute. If a country like Iran targeting stuff that America knows is being targeted and still can't protect it, how can we be arrogant enough to believe that we're anything other than very vulnerable?
Yeah, I've heard a few people recently downplay the Russian threat in particular, put Iran to one side, as if it's not going to happen now. It won't happen until 2035 or I mean, look at Putin right now. He's a cornered animal. I mean, goodness knows how he might react. And you're right. The fact is, we are vulnerable to these things. I think so many people have got wrapped around the concept of iron domes, golden domes, and any other color dome you want to name. And the truth of the matter is, they're not. They're not foolproof. They have leaks, and the more you spread out, the more stuff you have, the more points you have to defend. It's okay when you look at a country the size of Israel, you can almost get your head around the problem set. And to be fair, the Israeli dome was primarily set against the sort of rocket threat coming from Hezbollah and Hamas, whereas the far more tricky threat is the ballistic missile. And Iran have demonstrated that if you fire enough of them, a number get through. Probability is eventually going to pay off.
It is fascinating because certainly the media is quite interesting over the last few weeks. People have said, hang on a minute, why don't fighter jets shoot them down? You go, right, let's be really clear. Cruise missiles, air breathing, can fly along at sort of 400 knots. Fighter jets can fly a lot faster than that and therefore can intercept them, shoot them down. They don't generally maneuver. So, but they're ballistic as they go outside the Earth's atmosphere. They end up traveling several times the speed of sound. And it's quite an interesting challenge to shoot them down.
Yeah.
Not least of which, because when they're in space, you can't maneuver in space. They are on a ballistic trajectory. And it's only once they enter the Earth's atmosphere again that they can start to steer. And somebody once described it as trying to hit a bullet that's traveling three times the speed of a bullet with another bullet.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
It's a physics problem that's quite hard to solve. Interestingly, it's a bit of a terror weapon. So Israel get pretty good warning of a launch. So let's say you get 15 minutes warning. You don't know exactly where it's going to hit. So apparently, the whole of Israel is literally getting a wake up call at 3 in the morning to say inbound missile. What do? Well, the entire country runs down the bomb shelter and tucks themselves away. But you keep doing that to a nation night after night, day after day. You wear it out. So yeah, look, the idea that these threats are somehow can be shot out of the sky or don't impact on a nation just isn't there. And
it's
you're
all
right, in a country the size of the UK, you can't defend everywhere.
no, and that was, I guess, my next point really is that Israel's, as you say, is relatively small. Things like Patriot are mobile systems, but you still need a radar to be able to see the incoming threat. And there's several around the Middle East. The Americans have put fixed site THAAD radar systems, the like, hundreds of millions of dollars worth. But of course, several of them, and there was some AI imagery of some damage being done. But the Americans have admitted that the Iranians were actually quite effective at taking these things out because if they're fixed sites, last time I saw in the Middle East, it's sunny most of the time, so the satellites can have a very good view of where they are.
Yeah, yeah,
And you only have to deluge the defenses or use a mix of ballistic missiles and drones. So I guess the question is, how would we create a missile defense system in the UK? I saw a budget the other day that talked about the government to put 1 billion in the pot, which sounds a big sum of money until you recognise that Patriot costs 1 billion for a unit. Where would you put it? I mean, where would you? How many of these things would you need? What is the answer for the
yeah.
UK?
Well, I don't think the answer is to put a dome system in place. I'd be interested to see if America even cracks it. Obviously, Trump will continue to profess that he's got a solution, and industry, no doubt, will take the billions it might cost to build it. You're right; they did put £1 billion in the SDR. Of course, we don't know if that's included in the Treasury sum, so who knows how well it survived. But you and I also know that wouldn't be enough to give you 100% protection. And I think this is where the combination of layers comes in. So if you remember in our book, we talked about how Typhoons would do an air defense role against some of the air breathing systems fired further away from UK shores. So basically take the weapons on their way in. Ballistic missile, different problem set. Only Type 45's really got the capability. But, how many Type 45's can you put, around the UK Isles? And then you've got the sort of really cheap and cheerful drones, which maybe are less likely to come our way. But you then use the sort of systems that we've been using in Iraq. And obviously around Cyprus. So it is a layered approach. But you're right, there's a bit of denial at the moment that the UK is indeed an even at threat, which I think we need to kind of resolve that once and for all.
Yeah, and also because there was a bit of chat about, I remember having a chat with one of our military colleagues when we were down at Bryce Norton, and he was trying to look at it half full, and he said, well, we've got some really good detection systems, Findingdales, and we're part of a. And I went, okay, so you can see it coming. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, yeah. But many of our European colleagues would, well, okay, these things, if they're going over Europe, they're going in space over Europe, so they're almost impossible to shoot down there. You can only really shoot them on it re-entry because that's when they get very hot. They start slowing down. They're a lot more difficult to avoid detection and striking. But you have to have specialist weapons to take them out. Well, yeah, and then all of a sudden you sort of go down the route. Well, if we only had they can't do a lot of damage. And let's face it, they're a sort of £1,000. We're parking the nuclear debate for a minute. And £1,000 bomb. I know for Joe Public it's awful, but actually you and I as military guy, it's one bomb. It's not going to be the end of the world.
Yeah.
But if you haven't got any defenses about it, Putin or anybody, Putin is not a third world country. It's a first world country. He's got lots of capability, probably better targeting information and the like. If he was to threaten a missile strike into London or into Bath or into High Wycombe, everybody would be panicking. And because we haven't got any capability at all, and I go back to the question, if you were now running the Ministry of Defence, you can't afford everything, but nothing doesn't seem to be the answer. Where is the sweet spot, do you think? And should we be looking to just buy off America or try and find a way to do this ourselves?
Well, I actually think there's an alternative approach here, and I think Ukraine kind of indicates the way. I mean, Ukraine is being struck hundreds of times a night, and that war has been going on longer than the First World War. So, do we build a national resilience to absorb those types of hits, recover from them, and continue to function? Our energy infrastructure, our transport infrastructure, and all of that to the point where we don't actually have to worry. If you remember, you go back to the Second World War, we were going to bomb Germany to the point where we were going to attack cities and they would just give up. But not us Brits. We were going to survive the Blitz and it made us tougher. Well, that's actually the reality of life, isn't it? And so I think this idea of a pure, clean war where you can entirely protect and cocoon your population from the effects, I think those days are gone. I think the idea of an impenetrable wall is beyond us.
I think that nicely segues onto. I think my worry about our strategy against Russia is if all we do is build bigger walls, like a drone wall or you leave the initiative in the hands of the offense. Really interesting this week that Russia's been operating this shadow fleet of vessels moving up their oil around. A central pillar of the European strategy against Russia has been to make it very difficult for his economy. He sells oil, can't sell on the open market, has to sell at a discount. Low oil prices means he's been losing money, and it's hurting. The war breaks out in Iran. Suddenly, oil prices go through the roof, and then Donald Trump, bless him, decides to lift sanctions on the Russian oil. Now, all of a sudden, Sir Keir Starmer, politics or whatever, he had done an investigation to find out whether it was legal to actually intercept these vessels. Decided in March it was. Threatened Russia they'd do something about it. Since then, 200 vessels, over 200 vessels, have gone through our territorial waters, and we've done nothing about it. All of a sudden, we jump on one and seize it. Now, are you the political cynic here, or do you think there is actually a deeper story here?
Well, I could recite my Clausewitz. I've only got one Clausewitz quote.
I was going to say I've got to hear this.
Yeah, and it's war is politics by another means. Did he think that was the right time either to intercept for Russia to take notice? Did he do it because he was about to go to the G7 and he needed a positive UK story about standing up to Russia? Yeah, probably all of the above. I mean, it's been a long time coming, and the question is actually, why didn't we do it sooner? Now, I understand this ship, was it Cambodian flagged? And that turned out to have lapsed. So actually, it's a bit like a traffic infringement. You take it into custody because it's broken the law, which you could imagine Keir Starmer approaching in that way. Whereas I think more warrior type people will go, no, sod it, I'm going to nick you. You're not getting away with this. And of course, this Russian frigate that's now fired at some poor couple on their fifth honeymoon to Jersey or whatever it is again. So yeah, look, it does look a bit suspicious. I think it's long overdue. Should have done it a long time ago. I think the idea that we're just letting these tankers float about is long overdue.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you. I mean, don't get me wrong. We don't live in a world of binary. Was it all because of Starmer politics, or was it all for some other reason? But I do think there's no coincidence. Zelensky met, they call them the Tri now, UK, France, and Germany, and basically it's saying, look, Trump has relieved the sanctions on Russian oil. We need to get back on it. And actually, therefore, France earlier on this month, they seized a sanctioned vessel. The UK doing it as well. And my initial thought was, what's one vessel going to do? Frankly, Russia'd be laughing. It's 0.1% of the sanctioned vessels that are out there. But interesting, I then looked at one of these trackers that shows where the rest of these things are, and all of them were bomb bursting away.
Like wacky races.
Yeah, they were just tear-assing away from the UK, and you went, okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think the other angle of this, though, is the so what? Putin will have been furious, but what's he actually going to do about it? If he actually ends up escorting these things through territorial waters with warships, good luck with that. There's a lot of oil tankers and not many warships. But I do think
the pensioners thing's funny. I mean, if that's the Russian response, then I think we might find this a bit easier than we thought. But yeah, it's not exactly tit for tat, is it?
No, but I wonder, and this relates, I think, quite nicely. First of all, saying we don't need to have a full missile defense system in the UK. We just need to have something that makes Putin think twice before sending one, in the same way that picking up a tanker doesn't suddenly suggest we can take them all out, but it has that sort of bomb burst effect. And I think Putin does respect strength. You'll remember was it 2015 when the Russians sent 2 fighters into Turkish airspace, and they were warned, turn away. One of them turned back, and another one carried on. So Turkey shut them down.
Yeah, and don't mess with the Turks.
And Putin was apoplectic, but they never put another. And I do think we've got to end up somehow being a lot more robust about these actions. That's why I supported Starmer and doing this, because I think it was more than just politics.
Yeah, no, I think it's the right thing too. I just had a thought there. I mean, on this ballistic missile thing, which is obviously a conundrum for us because we clearly are theoretically in range. I mean, firing ballistic missiles at a nuclear nation is not a very sensible thing to do because you don't know what it is until it goes bang. So, I think Russia should be told in no uncertain terms, if you start irresponsibly lobbing around missiles that look like they might be something else, be careful what you get back.
Isn't that part what the book that the World War III was about, though? World War 3.0. Sorry, I must be correcting our book, because I want to pick up another chapter there. But one of the interesting chapters talked about, the UK is intercepting bears regularly flying down, but if they were to turn in towards a target,
Yeah.
what would we do about it? Because the harsh reality, and I've played this over with a couple of war games before, and the analogy is that you're in a bar in America, and I walk in with a gun holstered next to me. Am I a threat to you? Well, forget about to
Well,
me,
I'd
because
go,
I
hey,
probably would
Sean,
be.
how are you? What are you doing in here with a gun? Obviously, it's how that would start. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd now then pull the gun out of its holster. Am I now a threat to you?
Well, I'll be honest, I'd be getting a bit nervous.
Yeah. I now point it at you.
Yeah.
And you keep following this through, but the harsh reality is until the bullet comes out of the chamber,
Yeah.
you actually don't know. And it's too bloody late by then.
Yeah,
So,
self-defense actually does require an awful lot of patience on the receiver's part, to the
yeah.
point where you literally have to wait for bullets to fly. And there are actually specific rules in NATO about how you treat an aircraft, because it might be in distress. Heaven forbid, they might be, they might be defecting. You never know. So yeah, a single aircraft in peacetime just decide to wander across the UK. I can tell you what would happen. We'd shadow it. We'd try and make it land somewhere, but if it didn't, we might even fire some warning shots. We're not going to shoot it down unless we think it's about to do something, more dramatic. So if we started pointing at the ground at something significant, then you start going through your logic process and go, right, this is about to do something nasty, and then you might shoot it.
But I think it just highlights just how vulnerable. I particularly like that chapter of the book. But the one I wanted to settle on a little bit was this control the air thing. If we are generally looking at Russia as being emboldened and threatening more. Remember that, was it called Spider's Web, when the Ukrainians did that sort of, they hit a load of drones in a sort of container, and then off they went. And there's a fantastic, I think it's chapter 4, isn't it, on the book, that talks about how many million. I mean, talk me through that scenario, because I found it quite compelling.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of chapters that talk about a drone threat, but this specific one was one that had been basically brought on shore through a port. I forget which one. I think it was Plymouth. And they then get distributed around the country, parked on the back of a truck. How many trucks have you seen around the country parked in a lorry park overnight with an ISO on the back of it? You'd think nothing about it, would you? When suddenly the doors open up, next thing you know, you've got 40 drones heading towards 3 of your major airports each, and all mayhem kicks off. Yeah, it's entirely feasible. Ukraine have demonstrated how it would work. So we have to give them the benefit of the imagination. But yeah, it's entirely feasible. Do we check every ISO container that comes in this country?
Well, how much? I think it was 6 million. I wrote notes that come in each year. So it's an enormous number, and none of us track them all. And I guess they do some sort of rudimentary checks when they come in. But drones, would they really, because you can actually have them come in, and somebody can actually go in there and assemble them and put them together. And
well, yeah, you could do it that way. So this was a bit more sophisticated, literally an entire drone package arriving. But yeah, you look at the recent event with the arson attack on Keir Starmer's house and his car. Russians will happily spend a bit of money bribing a couple of lorry drivers or a couple of security guards at a dock to let them turn a blind eye or deliver something to a lorry park without knowing what it is. Yeah, it's entirely feasible.
It's also a bit of a worry because I was watching, obviously, both of us do a fair bit of commentary at the moment. And there's a lot of talk about Ukraine at the moment, and a lot of talk about Ukraine being on the front foot. And part of that is because of their rapid innovation of the use of drones and able to strike not only the supply lines to Crimea, but also the supply lines to the soldiers on the front line, but also in the deep, striking all sorts of oil terminals and the like, just causing havoc. And you sort of go, when this all started, I sort of thought, okay, it's because it's a David and Goliath story. I think, you and I used to say it was a fancy way of delivering a hand grenade. But if you look at the way this is all developed now, I wonder, how do we protect ourselves against that sort of asymmetric attack? Because Heathrow, it would spoil our holidays. It would have quite a dint in the sort of confidence of the nation. But if you also took out Bryce Norton, if you also went into Coningsby, if you also went into a middle of Wembley Stadium, I mean, there are so many things that would absolutely put the fear of God into our nation. And the size of the military we have today, with everything consolidated, particularly Bryce Norton, you could have a strategic impact for a relatively simple investment. How on earth do we deal with that?
Yeah, well, if you wanted to create a real strategic upset, you would do something like that. Of course, we'd instantly be at war. You know, if there was any proof that it was Russia, and I think that would definitely cross a boundary, then we're at war. So the idea that Russia will do that and then stop, I'm not quite sure where you end up next. But yeah,
But
it
could you
is.
prove it was Russia? Could you? I mean,
Well,
if
that's a
they,
good question. I think you probably could in the end. I'm not sure they're that clever. In fact, sometimes Russia almost leave the tracks as if they're daring you to even make the accusation. You know, these drones have got Russian, avionics in it. You kind of know where it comes from. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the scenario that we wrote in the book was really just to provoke an idea. I mean, could that be the catalyst that started a war? Yeah, absolutely could be. Can we defend against something like that? Well, unless you're searching every single ISO container in this country, or checking every drone manufacturer, every component that could be turned into a drone, there is always the chance that a rogue is going to get through and cause some damage, which comes back to my point about national resilience. Then don't be reliant on single points of failure that somebody can find as a tempting target. And that's something we need to think through quite carefully as well.
so I guess that again segues nicely onto it's been a fascinating week with John Healey resigning.
What happened? I missed that. I'm just kidding.
Well, you laugh. I mean, the funny story from me was I was in Sky doing my hourly update on, I think, on the Iran war, and I was on the phone talking to somebody, and the next thing I get was, "Come on, you get on set," and I was going, "Oh, they pulled me in early." And they often shuffle the order around, so I grabbed my bit of paper, ready to go, and I sit myself in live studio, preparing my head for the package I was about to deliver. And the presenter looked at me and went, "So, what are the questions you want me to lead with?" And I went, "No, the normal ones in the rundown." He looked at me and went, "No, no, no. Healy's resigned." Huh? And suddenly, you're about 10 seconds away from, they want you to give some informed commentary on something that you've literally just had hit you.
But
But I think,
one thing all our listeners should know is never underestimate ex-air crew in their ability to bullshit on demand, even on live TV.
no, thank you. I thought you were going to say something more flattering then, but maybe not.
I'm sure he did it brilliantly.
But first, I'd just like to get your perspective because you and I have both known, I'm going to tap dance around this a bit, some defense secretaries who, frankly, have been using it as a stepping stone for other things. And that doesn't feel that was the case with John Healey. He seemed well respected. I've met him a few times. He genuinely seemed to care. And of course, Al Cairns followed him out the door pretty quickly. Luke Pollard has not. But what was your take that somebody has felt the only way out of this is to actually resign? Or do you think this is to do with the impending leadership change and therefore Andy Burnham and the like?
So I think we need to separate the individuals. So let's just deal with John Healey first. I mean, I've met him a few times. I've heard him speak many times. I think he's a principled guy. I think he spent 4 years as a shadow defence minister, certainly quite a long time anyway. And obviously has been in the post 2 years whilst Labour's been in power, has dutifully followed through the process of what they said they would do with their various reforms. We can discuss how successful they've been, but then we know how sticky the MOD can be. Has gone through the SDR process, has gone through the patient process of the dip, patient being a strange word to use, and has ultimately come out the other end with nothing like the deal he was being, by the sounds of it, promised or expected. And, the gap was so large. I think he's done the only thing open to him. If he'd exhausted all other possibilities of eking out a few more here or a few more there, or going back to the drawing boards, I think the last year has probably demonstrated why that time was used up. And he's got to the point where it's just, I can't do it anymore. Now, politically, it's really damaging. The last thing Keir Starmer needs is this on his slop chit. But I think defence of the realm is that important that it's the only thing you can do. And here's where I applaud him, because if he hadn't done it, I'm going, oh, that's okay, 10 billion, 13 billion, whatever it is, that's fine. Here you go, Mr. Knighton. Get on with this. I know it's a bit short from what we said, but you'll make it work, won't you? And then all the chiefs get told to go, yeah, this is fantastic. Thank you very much, which is what's happened in the past. That would have been pretty terrible, because then we really would have been living a lie. So I think he's done the only thing he probably could have done. And I think it's the only thing he would have wanted to do. And I think that has given the likes of Rich Knighton and the service chiefs the wriggle room now to work out what happens next.
So what about let's look at the other figures then. So Al Ken's left pretty quickly as well. He certainly in the circles that you and I were mixing in seemed there are a lot of politicians saying he'd acted a bit recklessly and you sort of went, hang on a minute, he's not a seasoned politician. He's a former, service person. He's clearly cares a lot. So how he's done it may be a bit blunt, but but there'd been Luke Pollard stayed, and I sort of that you want a bit of continuity here. But what was your take on that?
So doing Luke Pollard first, if you like. I mean, he made the statement that John He said, look, I'm going to go, but I need you to stay. I need some continuity. I absolutely buy that. I could imagine them. And I think Luke Pollard's the sort of guy who would go, okay, I'll take one for the team. There does need to be continuity. I know where all the skeletons are. I'll stay behind and try and pick up the pieces. So I can believe that story genuinely between those two, having met them both. So I buy that. I think Al Khan's is a different story. I think he does have ambition, and therefore he's thinking differently. And goodness knows how politicians weave their wondrous ways with their various games of thrones. But his letter was very different, wasn't it? I mean, and I hadn't quite appreciated how much more of an outsider he was in the defence team. So he clearly wasn't brought into the tent on the dip. Whether that was because they didn't trust him, whether they didn't like his ideas. And now, of course, we're hearing all his ideas. Drones are the future. This is the way we'll solve all the problems. He's a Royal Marine Special Forces soldier. He has a very tactical view of defence. And I'm not belittling that. He's done some incredible things as a soldier. But, does he really understand the full complexity of what he's playing with here? I don't know. I don't know how close he was to it. But I think Al Khan's has gone for different reasons. And actually, if you read his letter of resignation, it's almost as much about the veteran bill in Northern Ireland and all of that as it is about anything else. So, yeah, there's a different story with Al Khan's. And I think it sounds like he might have gone anyway, actually. Had the dip landed and delivered lots of non-new tech, I think Al Khan's might have perhaps thought twice about what he was going to do. I wonder why he waited so long, because the Northern Ireland bill, part of the veterans bill, that's long past. So, what's he been doing for the last
No, but I think the danger was that, I mean, the media commentary very quickly moved from the military impact to the political impact and about pressure piling onto Keir Starmer. And in a way, it felt like that was a shame, because I think the problem here is that it's not easy to solve. Take politics out of it. You've now committed to spend 3.5% on defence by 2035, 3% by 2030. You and I have already covered on a previous podcast how difficult that is to do. And you've got to make difficult choices.
Yeah.
You can borrow, but there's no appetite for that. And if the difficult choices are probably going to end up focusing on the welfare bill. And that is not going to be easy for a government, particularly a Labour government, to... So I think this was sort of stress lines. I think my next question to you, though, you mentioned Rich Knighton. There were lots of calls around that actually he should also step down. And I felt very strongly he shouldn't. But I know you went up on X a little bit on this one. What was your take?
Yeah, I don't think he should resign. What's he going to resign for? Because the politicians have given him insufficient funds. The idea that the military can put their uniforms on and march across Whitehall to number 10, knock on the door and go, give us our money or we're off, as if number 10 would go, oh, okay, here's your check. It's not going to happen. They'd walk. It'd be terrible, to see. I think all of the chiefs would realise the damage that would do actually to their successors, who would now almost be kept out of the game, if you like. The damage to the service, the damage to our reputation internationally, the laughing stock that would be made of the country, not just defence. So look, this idea that senior officers can drop on their sword and fix political problems. There's a more sophisticated way to do this, and it is about making the argument, making the case. So, as you and I know, the cases everyone's tried to make the case up to the SDR, and it's probably the most difficult SDR to write ever since the Cold War, because we're trying to recover from lost ground and trying to increase the budget. Every other SDR you and I have been involved in has all been about cuts from the get-go, not at the end. But we clearly have an issue in defence about affordability. So how they manage it now is going to be interesting. But look, the job of a service person, and clues in the title, by the way, service, is to do the bidding that you're given by the politicians with the money that you're given. Your job is to say no when you can't achieve those things and be absolutely crystal clear, speaking truth to power about what you can and can't do. So don't put your people in harm's way unnecessarily because they're under resourced. But yeah, the idea that the chiefs should all walk is pretty ridiculous.
No, I was relieved because I heard some really strange commentary around this. And for me, the really simple thing is that, Rich may be an engineer and not a pilot. He's the best of his generation. He absolutely understands how the MOD works. He is incredibly smart. And actually, to take 40 years of experience in the service and just fall on his sword and be fish and chip wrapper tomorrow.
You're right. You're right to bring that up. I mean, do not underestimate how many people out there do not want an Air Force officer in position, and they certainly don't want an engineer doing it. So, yeah, Rich Knighton is under pressure for other reasons that are entirely nothing to do with his competence in the job. I listened to him yesterday at the Lord's hearing, and there's a guy who's measured. He knows what he's doing. He knows his stuff. You couldn't ask for a better person to be there right now. And we just had a wholesale change in the ministerial team. You want to get rid of that team as well because we've got such geniuses sat behind them who've got all the answers. I've heard enough now from ex-captains and lieutenants who are writing in the newspapers and everywhere saying, I've got all the answers. Okay. So why did you leave then at mid-30s when you could have stayed and helped out? Suddenly the experts. Do you know what though, Sean? Somebody said this to me the other day and I put it in my Twitter thread. It's easy to resign when you're a politician. You could be back tomorrow. You could be back. You could be the prime minister in 3 weeks' time. You have got another chance. If you resign as the chief after 35, 40 years of service, that's it. You're gone. And the service who grew you and chose you to be in that position has lost you and has now got to completely reset. Now, that's not to say we haven't had bad chiefs or chiefs that aren't as good as the next one. But the idea that people should fall on their swords because the Treasury can't find the money, not sure about that.
We're going to scamper on a couple of other topics as well. I know it's a busy old podcast, but there's been so much going on the air and space side. I noticed the Ukrainians are apparently going to now, their Ukrainian Air Force, going to get IRST for their fighter jets now. Now they've had these infrared short-range missiles ground launched up till now, and I largely because I sort of get it that if you've got a Russian fighter, he's looking for another fighter, doesn't see the threat on the ground, and all of a sudden you can whoosh one of these missiles up and give it a surprise, and they, by all accounts, been very successful. What I don't quite understand is why they were going to put a short-range infrared missile onto a fighter jet, because if it's to shoot down drones, then you're back into the logic of the IRST is quite an expensive missile against a cheap drone. Or it might be that it gives you more options to do something a bit more offensive. And given the other stories around the Ukraine starting to be a bit emboldened, I wonder what we should read into this.
Yeah, I sometimes feel a bit sorry for Ukraine because every country's going, oh, do you want 6 of these, 12 of these, 10 of these? And they end up with a hodgepodge collection and have to try and make it all work and get an instruction manual chucked at them at the same time. But, if you were in Ukraine, you'd never look a gift horse in the mouth, right? And actually, if you've got a common missile on the ground to a common missile in the air, there's some good logistics behind that. That makes sense. You're right about shooting down Russian airplanes is a pretty far-fetched. It's not regular occurrence, let's be honest, and certainly not short range. So I can only assume these are perhaps more about a short-range drone type, cruise missile interception capability. I think we're also seeing a Gripen coming soon. So bless them, they have got a real hodgepodge of
so why the Gripen? I mean, because I saw that as well and went, you and I have both lived through a service which had loads of different aircraft types, but every different aircraft type has a different bunch of spares, different bunch of training required, different bunch of everything, different pilot skills. At the moment, it feels like they've got loads of I think they had over 100 F-16s offered to them. I think we've only had delivery of about 30. They've lost quite a few because they're just still training the pilots. So what, as you say, what are we going to do with these Gripens?
So I'm going to eat a very, very small slice of humble pie here. And if Justin Bronk is listening, he'll send the rest of it to me. I was a big fan of the F-16 solution from the get-go for two reasons. One is they were ready now. And although they took forever to get there, in theory they should have come a lot quicker, and there was a lot more of them. And it was a really quick and easy way to re-equip them with Western type systems. The Gripen was out there, it was on offer, but I don't think it was available in the right numbers, and it certainly wasn't going to come quickly. All my assumptions were based on a war lasting 1 or 2 years. Well, we're in year 4 or 5 now. So if I'd known then what I know now, I think I might have seen the benefit of a Gripen solution in the longer to medium term, because it is the platform that potentially has got greater potential than an F-16. I do think what's playing here as well is Ukraine's desire, shall we say, to become less dependent on America. I think Zelensky's probably had enough of being played by the likes of Hegseth and Trump.
But the F-16s were often, I know it's an American aircraft, but they were offered by lots of European countries rather than America.
You're right, but as you well know, if anything you buy from America through foreign military sales comes with caveats, the supply chain will still be controlled by America. Any of the upgrades, software upgrades, plus those European nations have got rid of them, literally got rid of them, so they're not even functioning anymore. So yeah, it would be seen probably as being too much in hock with America. So I think there's a number of factors that have lined up here. And let's be honest, did we really think this war would be still going at this stage at the time? So yeah, look, I think Gripen could well be the medium to long-term solution. And look, good luck to them. I think Saab have got an aeroplane there that is clearly got a high degree of capability. There's arguments about how good it is, but yeah, this is a good opportunity for.
Because I wonder whether also linking up to your point about America, what Ukraine actually doesn't need a fighter jet. What it needs is a capability. It has to have different weapons on board. It needs to be able to rapidly put new weapons on, and actually in response to new requirements. You can't do that with an F-16. It's controlled by Lockheed Martin, and who knows what's going on behind the scenes. And as you say, the added political influence. I do wonder whether there is more now, certainly the drones and the longer range missiles, that Ukraine doesn't really care about test and evaluation. It's bolt them on and get them flying. And actually, they're going to need that rate of innovation as well in their fighter jet community. And I wonder whether Gripen is offering them a way to do things a lot quicker.
I mean, there will be a corollary benefit from this. I mean, we all know this. I mean, it's terrible to say it, but Ukraine is a test bed for a lot of these weapons, and industries will be learning an awful lot from their employment. So for Saab and the likes, of course, we're involved in Gripen to a degree. We'll be getting great feedback on this. And it may well be that we can put more bells and whistles on it than you can on F-16. So, yeah, it's never ideal, is it, to chop and change your weapon system mid-war? But we've got young aircrew now coming out of the basic training system here in the UK and other places. Fine, don't start them on F-16, start them on a Gripen. It's entirely viable. They're not bad once they're deployed either. They allegedly are pretty good out in the rough and tumble of deployed ops, which is exactly where Ukraine need them.
Yeah, well, yeah, I hope so. I mean, it's as you say, it's been going on a long time, and the final story I caught my eye this week in the news outlet was the tragic loss of the B-52. I don't even want to get close to looking at what happened and why it happened, because you and I both know that there'll be a full investigation. But it was an absolute tragedy. 8 people on board lost their lives, and it seemed to go down shortly after takeoff. I think the questions, though, that popped up in my mind were less about the dreadful accident and more about the fact that there were apparently 8 people on board. Now, why would that matter? It matters because the B-52, I mean, first of all, it's been flying for longer than I've been alive. It did its first flight in 1952. So I was -10 then. So it's been around for 8. I think they've said it's going to be the first 100-year-old airframe still flying. That's the plan. All sorts of things have happened to it because it's still immensely capable and has been used in the Iran war. Yeah. But yeah, because they have ejection systems for the crew, and I genuinely, you and I have been around this space for a long time, I didn't realize that they had a downward ejecting system for 2 of the crew. 4 of the crew go out the top, hatches blown, out they go. 2 go out the bottom. Really wacky how low they can be and still survive that. But what about the other two? What?
Have you ever sat in one?
No.
Yeah, I have. I mean, the cockpit is a cockpit, still a bit old, obviously, pretty old. You feel more like you're in a Second World War airplane than you do a modern aircraft. But the stations down the back are literally in a black pit, surrounded by dials and screens, no vision out the window of any note. So if this accident was low to the ground, unless the front crew are really switched on and find a way for everyone to get out quickly, you are really struggling. And if you're in two ejection seats, which the two navs, there's a radar nav and an ordinary nav, sit in the middle two, they go down, as you say. Well, that ain't going to save you. So yeah, and the other two, goodness knows where they were sitting, because it was a test flight and they were testing some new systems. So these guys presumably were either Boeing or various, contractors who were looking at their bit of kit. So yeah, it's absolutely tragic. And it's not unusual for people to fly in airplanes without parachutes. You and I do it when we go on holiday. So that in theory the risk is not great if you're not going to do something too dramatic. But yeah, a military aircraft, and it's quite something, isn't it, for some of the crew to have a means of getting out safely and not the other part.
Well, that's my point. Really, is that every time you and I were in a military jet, you flew with somebody else. I didn't, but often as not, I used to do check rides on people. An important part of the conversation before you get airborne was the contract about what you were going to do, when you were going to pull the handle, who pulled it first, it was all of that. And I get it if you've got six people all strapped to seats and out you go. But if you've got two that are not, what does that brief look like?
No.
And we all going to get out if there's a problem? You two, frankly, tough.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
You're right. I mean, we might never know, but if you're the captain of the aircraft flying, and goodness knows whether they had an emergency or a problem, we'll have to wait and find out. Are you going to perhaps try and save the airplane more because you've got two people down the back who can't escape? You can't just shout eject, good luck, everybody. It's just not an option. So yeah, who knows if that was a factor? But yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? Very tragic.
No, and it's certainly one of those that you don't often hear about, these big old girls going down. And it looked shortly after takeoff, so it would have been packed full of fuel, not a lot left, and that must have been horrendous. But our thoughts go out. As I say, it's one of those morbid way to end a podcast. But it thankfully it's not often those big old girls go down. But very sad to see it go down.
We can end on a high note. I am, if you're honest, I'm still being slightly scared from you walking in a bar with a gun. I didn't ask. Did you have a Stetson on when you did it? I don't know.
I had a Stetson and I had a little cigar chewing out the corner of my mouth as I'm doing it.
Right. I would have been scared in that case.
Always a pleasure, Greg.
You too. Cheers, Sean.
Oh.